Arkansas was the only game that did not get played, Arkansas and Missouri. So at least that's one thing the league has going for him. Talk about that here with Connor O'Gara from Saturday Down South. Connor, did you get yourself enough turkey, enough dressing, some sandwiches? You have a lot of leftovers here. What's the deal in your fridge?
So I am just finishing some leftovers right now. Actually, I just had some lunch. I did the Thanksgiving dinner last Wednesday with my wife's company. They put on annually a Thanksgiving dinner every year. I had a socially distanced Thanksgiving dinner outside, but I had ham for Thanksgiving, and I get the choice. Sometimes I pick turkey, sometimes I pick ham. But you know what? I am not going to sit here and pretend like ham for Thanksgiving is some like traditional thing. I get it. Not everybody likes it. I haven't had the best experience with turkey. I've had good turkeys, but to me, ham has just got a much higher floor than turkey does, and that's why I sometimes default to it.
Well, you're not going to find me criticizing you about that choice. I would only criticize you if you fasted on Thanksgiving, because I don't know anybody that does that, or at least not voluntarily. All right, what can we get into for the SEC this last week? A lot made of Sarah Fuller's kickoff in the second half for Vanderbilt. It's so interesting, too, because you have these stories one day after the other involving Vanderbilt. One, an uplifting story involving the first female player in the history of Power 5 football. And I understand it was one play and a squib kick, but she played. And then Derek Mason is shown the door the very next day. It's pretty interesting how things change sometimes, huh?
Vandy is having itself a weekend. We can say that. What happened with Sarah Fuller was one of the cooler things that I think we've seen in college sports in this weird, strange year in which it seems like everything is being taken from us. And I took the side of, look, I'm going to appreciate a historic moment, something that I think we'll be talking about years from now, and something that could open doors potentially down the road for anybody who wants to follow in her footsteps. And somebody has to be the first to do something. And I give her, so much praise for being willing to take on the criticism, which she knew she was going to face, and to be willing to do something like that and help out Vandy, who was desperate for help. I mean, that's why this situation unfolded in the first place. Vandy's numbers have been terrible. I mean, they've been depleted the entire year. They had the first person opt out in the SEC of college football, and that was Orrin Milstein, who was their kicker. Like, they have had major issues all year with depth. So I give her praise for doing what she did over the weekend. And then, with Derek Mason getting fired the very next day, I mean, that is kind of peak 2020. Like, something good and inspiring happens, and then immediately we're reminded, there's probably always going to be some bad to follow. A tough day, a somewhat inevitable day, but at the same time, we were questioning what this was going to look like in a pandemic year. And Candace Story-Lee, their new athletic director, made the decision that Derek Mason didn't deserve a year 8, and they're going to go in a new direction.
Well, and then there's also the idea that maybe Derek Mason could feel better about not working for a school that quite obviously doesn't care about football at all. And the administration doesn't really back that program up as much as they do some of the other athletic programs on that campus. So let's move on to programs that actually do care about football. Texas A&M and Florida, this is an interesting battle of what could end up being one of the two teams out of the SEC that could conceivably end up in the college football playoff. I think by now we've already put Alabama in the playoff. They're going to roll against LSU. If they play Arkansas, they'll probably beat the Razorbacks as well. And I think, even if they lose in the SEC championship game, Bama's done enough to get into the playoff. But Florida and Texas A&M, right now, it's like they're playing for style points. And I feel like A&M's win over Florida has almost been discounted in some ways. And with a win over LSU, just 20-7, meanwhile Florida rolls on Kentucky, it feels like there might even be a little momentum towards Florida outranking A&M soon.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of weird because I was just having a conversation with my brother who writes for our Big Ten site, Saturday Tradition, and we were talking about Ohio State's playoff chances, and he was like, well, who's A&M's big win against? I'm like, Florida. He's like, oh, yeah, that's right. I mean, a lot of things have happened since then to make us kind of forget, what A&M has done since that loss to Alabama. I actually argued last week that I thought Florida's resume overall was better than A&M's. Obviously, the head-to-head still matters, but I don't think necessarily it's going to come down to those two teams. So I don't want to spend as much time debating between them, because right now, that's all going to get sorted out, right? If Florida wins in the SEC championship, Florida's getting into the playoff. There's nothing A&M can do about that, despite the fact that they'll both be one-loss teams. The selection committee has left that open right now for that to happen. But, it is interesting because I think that both of these teams have been hoping to have better efforts over the weekend, and they're hoping to be able to win these games, by 40 points. But that ultimately didn't happen. I think that side by side, their resumes will become a little bit less relevant as we move forward here, just because Florida's path is very, very easy to dissect. A&M's path is a lot more complicated with a lot of moving pieces. So I think that that's just something that we're going to have to keep in mind as we talk about A&M. I'm not sure style points matter as much as we think so with them.
Speaking of Connor O'Gara here on Halftime, Connor, you bring up the Florida Gators. Do you think the Gators could match up with the Crimson Tide when we get to the SEC championship game? Do you think the Gators could match up with Alabama and maybe upset the Crimson Tide?
Yeah, I think they're going to be able to score some points. I don't think they're stopping that Alabama offense. They're just not. And I think that, with each passing game, we're realizing that what Steve Sarkisian is doing with that offense is special. They just continue to dominate teams. And it doesn't necessarily – they currently have the longest FBS streak ever with at least 35 points in a game, dating all the way back to the start of the 2019 season. This team just scores, and we're thinking, Jalen Waddle's out. This all of a sudden opens the door. No, it doesn't. Alabama's just going to keep putting up points no matter who they're playing against. And this is a Florida secondary that has had its fair share of issues. I think Florida would definitely score some points. I don't doubt that. I think as good as Alabama's defense has been, Florida's offense has been relatively unstoppable. But I still right now would say that Alabama's going to have the advantage, because I think they will be able to get a few more of those defensive stops. And that's the key in 2020. You don't have to have a defense that holds teams to 7 points. You just got to have a defense that can get a few stops for you, and you can hope that your offense can do the rest, and knowing that you're probably going to have to score 40 points to win one of these big-time games. But as boring as it is, I'd probably still give Alabama the advantage right now.
A little bit of SEC news that came across during the weekend. I believe it's been confirmed this morning. Javon Mathis has entered the transfer portal with Georgia, which at first kind of surprised me, just based off, obviously starting against the Razorbacks to start the year, struggled a little bit, then they move on to Stetson Bennett. But the more I thought about it, just like this morning, and now the news coming out officially now, not really surprised by this move. Are you?
No, that's been the writing on the wall. A lot of people said as soon as this came out over the weekend that this is inevitable. And, I say it's somewhat inevitable because what we've seen play out with JT Daniels is a sign that if he is there, he's going to be the guy moving forward, assuming he doesn't leave for the NFL draft after this year. Remember, he is draft eligible, but the sample size has not been good, and Arkansas was a part of that, and we saw him in the opener just not look ready. This is somebody who, yes, he's played very limited. Basically, he's only played in 2 games this year and only completed 40% of his passes. It was really rough against Florida. There's somebody that's going to take a chance on him, and he's still going to be somebody that's going to have, I think now with this year with eligibility not counting, he's going to have 3 years of eligibility left. So, the tools are there. The fit just wasn't. Maybe if he can go into the right sort of place and develop a little bit more and not be kind of thrust into that role, maybe he's going to have a chance. But, yeah, I think Arkansas did some things to him that certainly made a lot of people realize that Javon Mathis might not be ready to play big-time college football yet.
Speaking of the Razorbacks, we can't let you go without getting your opinion on the Razorbacks' upcoming matchup and obviously taking on Missouri this Saturday at 11 a.m. And, Connor, I think when you look at it, I think I'll pay. Well, this may be the Arkansas bias coming out of me. If Arkansas has all their key players back, particularly on that defensive line, linebacker, receivers, whatever the spots that were missing, that were the glaring missing ones against the LSU game, Arkansas should be in good shape against this Missouri matchup. And I'm obviously, you can't take Missouri lightly in this matchup, but I just feel like if Arkansas has those key guys back and Arkansas plays well, it should result in a win this Saturday.
Yeah, I would tend to think that, but man, lost in the shuffle of Sarah Fuller's historic debut was Mizzou played a really good game. And I know it's against the Bandies, so you take it with a grain of salt, but this is a Mizzou defense that, I tend to think that we kind of think, oh, okay, Barry Odom, now that he's with Arkansas, this Mizzou defense was automatically going to take a big step back. That hasn't happened. Ryan Walters has done a tremendous job in his same role that he was in on Barry Odom's staff at Mizzou. Nick Bolton is the Defensive Player of the Year probably in the SEC, and they are really kind of coming into form. And I think that that's a Mizzou team that all of a sudden you think, man, that's not going to be a fun team to play against for 60 minutes. And really is going to depend on this game plan. You would trust Barry Odom to have the right game plan to shut down a team that he's been very familiar with. But at the same time, it's a very new offense that Eli Drinkwitz has. Larry Roundtree looked darn good against Vandy. And if this is a team that blocks up front, it's going to be a difficult 60-minute fight for Arkansas. A couple weeks ago, I would have said, yeah, definitely give me Arkansas to win this game by a touchdown. Now, I think this is a coin flip, and it could come down to the last possession.
Connor, I got a couple of things for you here. One in the SEC, and then we'll finish out with a Big Ten thought. I know LSU lost their top receiver, Terrace Marshall Jr., to an opt-out for the final 2 games. He's the third leading receiver in the SEC, also ranks third in touchdowns. I can't even believe I'm thinking this, because Georgia is a 33.5-point favorite over Vanderbilt. Alabama right now, 27.5-point favorite against LSU, and I see Alabama absolutely crushing LSU, maybe more so than Georgia beats Vanderbilt. What do you think?
You know, I don't know if Terrace Marshall saw the writing on the wall and saw, you know what, I'm going to have to go up against Patrick Surtain this weekend, and that doesn't seem like a fun way to spend my Saturday. But, you know, it's a very interesting time to opt out after they lose, because he's been phenomenal this year. I mean, all that guy has done is catch touchdowns. I mean, he's been so good since he came back from injury in 2019. But, yeah, I think now without him, this favors Alabama a lot. And I know that there are LSU fans hoping that that defense turned the corner after what they did to Texas A&M. The pass defense finally looked good. But this is still an Alabama team that you can't defend man-to-man. You can't defend Devontae Smith man-to-man. And Steve Sarkisian is going to scheme guys open in a battle of Steve Sarkisian versus Bo Pelini. Give me Steve Sarkisian 10 times out of 10 in that. So I still think this is going to be a lopsided game. But maybe timing of this, even though with LSU finally looking a little bit, better on the defensive side of the ball, impacts what that spread is going to look like. And maybe they aren't necessarily as ripe for the picking as they were a few weeks ago.
So, all right, is the Big Ten going to even have a championship game? There's thoughts that Ohio State's game with Michigan State this weekend could get canceled. That would put them below the threshold necessary to play for the Big Ten title. Not, however, there is no threshold for the college football playoff, so it's a little bit difficult to wrap your mind around that thought. You can't play for the conference title. You can play for a national championship. But, right now in the Big Ten, things are worse than they've been, I think, even since the start of the season.
They're going to play a Big Ten championship. They're going to do whatever they can to move mountains to give Ohio State a chance. I said coming into this year, the Big Ten acted the way that it did, and it wanted to fit in as close to a full season as possible at the last minute, because you realize, wow, we could be ruining Ohio State's chance to win the national championship. This was an Ohio State team that had the best chance to do that since that 2015 team did, where they returned so much talent. And as we know, national championships in the Big Ten are few and far between. And that's been the motivation all along. They're going to do whatever they can to make sure that they change the threshold or they schedule more matches for Ohio State, because they know how important it is to get Ohio State into the playoff. And they're not necessarily going to let these cancellations try and impact that. They're going to do everything in their power, I have to think.
Connor, it's great talking with you as always. Glad to be back with you on this Monday. Enjoy the football this week. We'll talk about it Monday next week.
Thanks, Connor.
Sounds good. Appreciate it, guys.